Welcome to LeaderIQ, where we share the stories of leaders in brand and retail so you can learn what led them to find success in their careers while giving you an intimate look at how they made foundational decisions along the way. This show is hosted by Guru Harry Heron, who is the founder and CEO of CommerceIQ. Guru has spent most of his career working as a leader at companies like Amazon and eBay before becoming an entrepreneur himself. This podcast is brought to you by CommerceIQ, a company which Guru started in 2019 that has become the e-commerce operating system for brands like Logitech, Johnson & Johnson, Kellogg's, Mars, Duracell, and many more. If you're interested in learning more, check out commerceiq.ai. With that, let's get to the show. Today's guest is Ben Gadbois, CEO of Instant Brands. Ben moved to the US from French-speaking Canada at the age of 17. When he moved, he didn't speak much English and worked as a janitor where he cleaned over 100 toilets a day while also painting apartments on the weekends, where he'd sleep at whatever job site he was working at until the work was done and he went back to school on the Monday. Since that humble start, Ben has had an illustrious career as an international CFO, then later president for Newell Rubbermaid, global president and COO of Spin Master, which he helped take public in 2015, and now as CEO of Instant Brand. Guru goes deep into some of the fascinating stories from Ben's international experiences, as well as talking through some of the charitable causes that Ben is so passionate about. This is one of our most favorite interviews, so here is your host, Guru Hari Haran and Ben Gadbois.
Well, thanks, Ben. It's great to see you. It's always fantastic to share a conference with you. So welcome to the podcast. The format is going to be where we're going to talk a little bit about your early life, then go into your professional career, and finally some learning and inspiration that you'll leave for us to noodle on. So want to just jump in. Maybe I'd love to, Ben, talk a little bit about your early life. What was it like growing up, and are there early upbringing lessons that shaped you the leader that you are today?
Well, first, thank you, Guru, for having me. So I'm really happy to chat with you today. So to answer your first question is, what was my life growing up? So I grew up in Quebec City in Canada, and then I moved to Montreal when I was a little bit older. So I grew up speaking French only. So I'm a good old French Canadian, as true as they come. And I started my life living in a trailer park early on with my family. We didn't have much, but I can say that one thing that shaped me to who I am today, and directly my kids, is my parents instilled very, very strong values in me from early on. So my dad was always working very, very hard, long hours, but he always told me, work hard since I was very, very young, and always do what you say you will do. And the thing that's great when I grew up, and my experience growing up, is I saw that these values did work for my father. I saw his career grow up. We eventually moved out of the trailer park. Life got a little bit better. And, he ended up being a general manager in a mid-sized business. And this is what took me to moving to the US when I was 17 years old, where I didn't speak any English. So it was somewhat tough at first. And one thing I did when I moved to the US, because I really had a hard time communicating with people since I spoke no English, is I started janitorial companies as well as a painting services company when I was in high school. So I'm one of the people that can say that I used to clean 100 toilets every day. And I can tell you a lot of story about that, but I probably won't hear today. And so what I would do is every day after work, I had all these companies. I mean, after my high school, I would go work 4 or 5 hours cleaning different companies, different businesses. And on the weekend, what I would do is I would go paint apartments. And I had a whole system where I would bring my pillow, my radio, my lunch, which was 2 little pieces of bread with some cheese and butter in between. And then I would literally sleep there until the job was done. And that's what I did my weekend. And I went back to school. So that was a bit of, and I played some hockey too when I was younger, which I really enjoyed as well. So overall, I had a really good youth. I worked hard, I'm very fortunate. I came from a family that put really strong families in me, and that definitely provided me everything that I needed.
Oh, Ben, that was a lot to unpack. I would say the one thing that I expected was that you played hockey, being a Canadian, and that too from Montreal side. But everything else was unexpected. Oh my God, there's a lot to unpack here. Tell me a little bit. Like, actually, I'd love to go into that the story about how was it growing up in a trailer park? Oh my God, like that's incredible. Like, did you go to an actual school, or was it more like homeschooling? Were there any early lessons that came out of like that struggle that you might have gone through?
Yeah, what's interesting is when you're a kid and you're really young, you're like 4 or 5 years old, and today you reflect on it's like, oh my God, I live in a trailer park, but I had great parents and I had a great environment. I had everything that I needed. I had a lot of fun growing up. So for me, it was like, it's about the environment, right? And the fact that my parents, when they started, didn't have much, did not impact the fact that, I cannot complain about anything growing up because my parents always gave me everything that I needed. They always supported me with everything that I needed. And I went to school with all the other kids. And, you realize later on in life that maybe I didn't have clothes as nice. And, if you only have like one pair of pants when you grow up and all the other kids, you realize later on, like maybe change their pants every day. Mine were being washed every day, right? But it was kind of like the same pair of pants or the same shirt every day. And when my sneakers had a hole in it, and the sole would get detached, we glued it together. We didn't buy a new one, we glued it, right? But when you're a kid, you don't care about that stuff, right? So it's about the environment, and I had a very positive environment.
That is incredible, Ben. Yeah, I have a special place in my heart for the immigrant rags to riches stories. I wouldn't say mine is as dramatic as yours. I certainly sort of landed in the US with about $72 in my pocket and paid out $3 in exchange fees. So I actually ended up being $69 when I actually walked out of the airport. But this one is
well,
a
you
lot
did okay
more.
with that $69.
So that's a crazy story. But yeah, and when you started in America, in the US, the US tends to be a lot more like a presentation culture, sales culture. It matters how you present, how you talk, especially in outward-facing roles. And I would imagine that you had some of those. How did you adapt, especially coming in from a non-English speaking background, and you say you did not speak English until you were 17? How did that transition go, and how did you adapt and snap into this culture?
Yeah, I think look, it was definitely a difficult adjustment coming to the US and being expected to function like a 17, 18-year-old kid. And not speaking English. So it was definitely not an easy adjustment. And as you learn to speak English, I'd always have a lot of people making fun of my accent. But I can say that my French accent was also not always bad. So I was okay. It was okay on different aspects of going through life. But you learn to, I read a lot, and I always spent a lot of time making sure that I would practice and that I would always still be, I guess, show some form of resilience. And even if people made fun of my accent or I didn't know what word to use, I still spent a lot of time with people. And eventually what I did also is I took a job as a waiter in Bennigan's. And then you don't have a choice to talk to everybody, right? And that, believe it or not, like being a waiter, really waiting on table, you're always talking to people. And that actually helped me a lot. It helped me a lot with how to deal with people, helped me a lot with my English, and also helped me a lot understand people.
No, that's a great story. I've heard a lot. I didn't grow up in this country, but I've heard a lot. Like waiting tables really teaches you a lot, and this one I haven't heard. Especially coming from a non-English speaking background, I could see the impact and the advantage that you would have gotten by interacting with so many people. That's great.
Yeah, I will tell you, Guru. I think that every kid should go wait table at some point in their life because it really helps you deal with people. You have wonderful people, you have difficult people. It allows you learn how to deal with different situations very early on. And even today, much later, you still get some lesson that you can still use in your life from the days you were a waiter.
No, I think, and as a parent of a 10-year-old, that's really good advice. I see my son growing up super entitled, and he doesn't know that he's growing up entitled. That's the worst thing. So
Yeah, I
this is
think
a
we all
good
have
one.
the same problem.
Yeah. Yep. And moving forward into your college days, you pursued accounting as a starting career path. Did you was that thought through, or was that a certain interest that you pursued when you took up that path?
No, actually, it's interesting because I really wanted to go into marketing. I was really passionate about marketing. I always loved business. And, I started my business when I was younger. And, as I mentioned, and, they weren't exciting business, but, you get to learn real fast how things work. And I really want to go into marketing. But my dad and his CFO in those days told me, like, it's great you're going to be in marketing, but how can you create value in the business if you don't understand how the money moves? And that really hit me. And what they really told me is, like, go learn how the money works, because once you understand how the money works, the rest will come. You can go figure out the rest. So this is how I decided to go into accounting and economics. And then I got my CPA and my CMA from there, and so I stuck with it for a while.
No, I love that. Go learn how money works. That's a good takeaway. Actually, on going back to your early business that you talked about, can you talk to us a little bit about how you went about it? Why did you decide the janitorial business? Why, and what were some early lessons that you took away from that?
Yeah. Well, what I realized is very early on, like I did not speak very good English. So that was definitely an issue for me to do, traditional facing, maybe retail work, so I took the opportunity to decide okay, so what can I do with my limited language at this point in time? And I would just go to industrial park and I would knock at every door and I would say, look, how much you paying for your janitorial services? And I can take your cost down by half. And some people would say, no, we're good. Like, why would they trust a 17, 18-year-old kid? And some people would say, it's interesting. I'll give you a try. And eventually I built the business doing this with a few different places. And I was able to cut people's cost in half. And then eventually what I was able to do. And, you got to remember, this is a really, really long time ago. But the more business I got, then all of my friends would come work with me and they became part-time job. Right. So so it was actually really good. It paid for a lot of my youth activities.
I think that's great. I think the early lessons of building something from scratch and selling something, those really give you the early foundations. I've certainly seen that in my career as well, and I strive for getting that into my into my son's upbringing as well. That's an incredible journey. Looks like.
Yeah, well, thank you. And again, I think same thing is you learn. I think everyone that starts business or that do anything they're really, really passionate about, and I think the key thing is passion, is the word no doesn't exist. No is just the start of a conversation. Right. So the greatest thing is if someone says no to you, well, you celebrate the no because you're now engaged in the dialogue with the other person. And then it's all about like finding out like what are their objection and then getting them to yes. And I think, when you do door to door and you get a lot of no's, as you know, same thing, right? With your business, you get a lot of no, and it's always like overcoming the no and turning the no into a yes. So I think all of these things, for all the people, the earlier you can learn that in life, the better it is. And never forget it, that no is actually a blessing because you're having a conversation.
That's great, and it also gives you a nice thick skin to actually take some hardships, right? And
yeah,
actually
absolutely.
Part of the game. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, going into your early part of your career, Ben. So, after your role at Arthur Andersen, you decided to make your way into the CPG industry, the brand manufacturing industry, and you've since then stuck in this industry, and clearly you've loved it. So, but I'm curious, how did that all start, and why a career in Black & Decker?
So I went to Arthur Andersen. I worked there for about 18 months. I absolutely hated it. And this is when I'm like, and it's like, and again, it's like, it's incredibly technical work. And I made amazing friends till this day at Arthur Andersen the time I was there, but it just wasn't for me. And then I got a call from someone at Black & Decker and said, look, we're looking for internal consultant / internal audit with an international focus where you would spend 2 months, could be in Europe, could be in Australia, could be in Asia, could be anywhere. They would send us for 8 weeks. And then we had different programs to go do audit. Half of the program would be auditing the business, make sure all the controls and things are great, which was, the things you would do at Arthur Andersen. But then the other half would be about management consultant. How can you add value? Ask the management, where do they need help that they would like fresh eyes to look at? So it was amazing learning, but this is how I ended up at Black & Decker. So I spend most of my time traveling internationally. And then I took a position with Kwikset, which was their hardware division, part of Black & Decker in California.
That's great. And so it looks like you had a passion for looking at other international markets that you built out very early on, which looks like you then carried forward into some of your other roles in the future as well.
Yes, absolutely. I was always intrigued with international business, and it kind of happened, and I really, really enjoyed it. And the one key thing that you also learn from it, and again, those are like really early days in my career. I'm still in my fairly early 20s, is I really got to appreciate people from different culture, different walk of life, different experiences, different ways to do things. And, one of my favorite questions was I always ask when people say, oh, I know international. And those, several years, things continue to evolve on a global scale now. But I would always ask, okay, you are in this country. You are at 7 a.m. on Sunday. Where are you going to go buy milk for your kid? And if you can't answer that, you don't really understand the country. And most people can't answer that until you truly spend time in that country with the people, understanding the culture and how things move in a country. So I really, really enjoyed those years traveling across. Like, I think I've been at probably around 70 different countries. And the amount of the way it enriches someone's life to just kind of learn a little bit about everyone and all of these cultures is fantastic. And I think anybody that can travel early on in their life and just expose yourself to something different, I think it's a great experience for everyone.
That's incredible. So to paraphrase, looks like the key themes over there are around learning different cultures and being grounded about it. And not going really top down and looking up a Wikipedia, but really thinking about the daily lives of people and how they're living their lives and starting from there.
Yeah, well, and I think one of the lessons, Guru, you learn too, is, at least for me, is that then you come back to United States and people say, well, this is so and so has done this in this country. They're so wrong. Well, it's like, well, wait a minute, what's the context? Right. So I think for us as American, we put ourselves into a certain context with a certain lens and we see things a certain way. Nothing wrong with that. But I think, there's always two sides to every coin. And I think understanding both sides of every coin is the key to really understanding any situation or any issue, is always making sure that both sides of that coin is understood.
That's correct. Yeah, it's a great point. But I still can't make out why Canadians are so big about hockey. But that's for another day.
Because you haven't spent enough time there.
What's the story about how you ended up at Newell Rubbermaid? That's a lot of your initial part of your mid-career looks like that got built out over there. Yeah.
So when my last assignment at Black & Decker was to do a plant startup in Mexico, in Mexicali. And we started a plant from the ground up to about 800 people. And it was actually amazing. So I pretty much lived in Mexico. And it was a great experience. I did that for maybe a year and a half, 2 years, a little bit under 2 years. And it was just, it was a difficult place. Well, let's just put it that way. Most people would not have taken that assignment because you're in a border city. There's a lot of violence, right? You're talking about in the 90s. So, if some of you guys watch the shows like Narcos and some of this, and, I don't want to paraphrase things because Mexico was absolutely wonderful. The people are incredible, but there's just a lot of things happening on a border city at any given time. And you always have to be really careful. And one night I got attacked and it wasn't good. And I decided that, look, at some point it's just not worth it. And, I also remember having to cross the border every day when I lived there. And it was taking me almost 2 hours to go from the plant. My house was literally on the, just a fun story, that my house was 1/4 mile from the plant, but there was the border in between, and it would take me 2 hours to go to that half mile, and have to go to the border every day where, you wait in line for an hour, and then, you get cleared, and then the dogs have to smell your cars, and then they put you in the parking. They're looking for drugs, looking for contraband, looking for anything else. And it's a bit of a grind. And this is why the people that do that, all of our friends that do that everywhere, every day, like, I have a lot of respect for that, because it's not easy, and it's not everybody that can do that. And for me, after a while, it was just time to do something else. And Black & Decker told me, we really like what you're doing. We'd like you to stay here another year. And at that point, like I said, I'd been attacked. So I had a broken jaw, broken nose, I've been missing a bunch of teeth. And I'm like, you know what, it's time for me to move on. So then I decided to join Newell Rubbermaid.
Wow, that's an incredible story as well. Like, so was it just on the streets that is just a random attack on you?
Yeah, it was just I just went in an ATM machine, and then I got hit with brass knuckles, and that was it. So I got lucky. Actually, I got lucky. Nothing else happened, but you learn your lesson, and then I think the lesson, especially when you're young, you think, I can take care of myself, no problem. And it's just a very, very humbling experience.
Wow. Now entering Newell, this is where you're starting to get the letter C in your title, and you got into as a CFO in many international markets. What is the thing that stood out in your experience that really gave your folks the confidence to give you these big roles? I spent a couple of years in the U.S. with Newell at the division called Window Fashion that I worked. Then I became the CFO for Calphalon, which a lot of folks know, the cooking company, great brand, great business. And then there was new CEO, a lot of restructuring in the company. And there was an opportunity where they hired a new group president in Europe, and they said they're looking for someone crazy to come work for this guy. And nobody raised their hand, and I raised my hand, and I says, you know what, I'll do it. What do I have to lose? And I like the international market. So this is how I ended up living in Belgium and Paris for about 5 years. And it was a great experience. Like, it was probably one of the best time of my life. What we were able to do there, I think we had 127 sets of books. We ended up closing down 25 plants. We sold business, we bought business, we consolidated business, we liquidated businesses, and it was a wild west. But the amount of value that we were able to create in those years was absolutely fantastic. And then when I would turn 21, they made me president for half of Europe, and this is when I made the shift from really finance, accounting to general management when I was 31 years old. Ben, that's a key point that you make, which is a great lesson, and I resonate a lot, is raising your hand. I think that's such an important thing. And I often, in my role as well, I look around, there are things that need to be solved. Not anybody's raising their hands, but one person does. And you develop a special bond in that, okay, that person basically stuck their neck out to actually do it. Do you think that was something like a turning point, and sort of just taking that initiative, which nobody else did, was a key platform to springboard your career?
Yeah, absolutely, Guru. I think that my philosophy, and everybody's got their own, and it's quite fine, but it's always like, if nothing attempted, nothing gained. Right. So you have to take some risk in life, and it has to be calculated risk, has to be smart risk. But when you're young, you can take almost all the risk that you can, because you don't have the same level of responsibilities, right? You don't have 4 kids. You don't necessarily, sometimes you do, and that's okay too. But any career mistake that you make when you're still in your 20s, you can recover from with absolutely no issues. Right. So I think that's the best time to take risk and sometimes do some crazy moves. And for me, that was a crazy move, but that really, really was a huge catalyst in my career. to do that because it accelerated my career. Like every year I was there, it was like being in the US for 4 or 5 years from a career path standpoint.
It's interesting you bring that up, and it was crazy in the early part of my career as well. It was similar where every time my W-2 will go up every year in a very dramatic fashion. Part of me is obviously very happy. The part of me started to think, gosh, like I'm now just made it that much more difficult to walk away from what I have right now. And you just had to do it. And one fine day, I still remember the W-2 was pretty high, and actually had just filed my taxes literally, and the next month I quit, saying if I'm not starting a company now, it's never going to happen. So without any idea, without nothing.
But think about the risk that you were taking, and this is something, Guru, that I think is so difficult for people is to it's really risk taking, because I think that the longer we wait in our career, most people have very good paths, and this is great. It's really respectable and it's fantastic. But sometimes if you have like an itch to do something bigger, to do your own thing, because that's what you want to do, that's what your passion is, the longer you wait, the harder it is.
That's absolutely well said. Actually, the longer you wait, the harder to take risks. Oftentimes, a lot of people join big companies early in their careers and spend years, and it starts to take away that prime time to take risks. So that's a good. And how did that translate in terms of career growth into Newell? Wondering what are any other stories, especially key successes or key failures that you went through in your career at Newell?
Yeah, one of the most stellar or most memorable moment in my career was when Newell made me president at 31 years old. I was completely not prepared. I had no clue what I was doing, really, and I can admit that today. And I remember there was a CEO at Newell. And he's like, we're making some changes in Europe. He went to the board and he said, we want Ben to be the president for half of Europe. And the board said, no way. Like, there's absolutely no way we can make this kid president. He's 31 years old. What does he know? It's like, we've never made a president that young. We've never had a president that young. And one of the board member flew over to Paris to have dinner with me. And it was an ex very, very high ranking retired general from the US Army. And it was one of the most impressive dinner I have ever had. Like, I was grilled like military style for about 2.5 hours. But it was really, I was getting drilled, not about my knowledge of business, not about what I knew, what I didn't know, what I had done. It was all about my values. And it was all about what kind of leaders are you going to be? Why do you think you can lead people? You don't have the experience that most of the people working for you have. Why will they follow you as a leader? And it was like, what does integrity means for you? How do you lead by example? It was a military style grilling for well over 2 hours on my values as a person. And at the end of the dinner, he stood up, he looked at his watch, he stood up, and salute me, shook my hand, and he said, son, if you follow your values for the rest of your career, you'll be a fine leader. And turned around, left, and then I got the news that 2 hours later that they were going to let me be a president. And that was something that will always stay with me, and that I'll always try to remember, is that at the end of the day, no matter what we do, values is what carries us forward. And then you're asking, like, so how did that shape the rest of my career? Is I worked really hard, Guru, right? So I was 31 years old, and I was like, I always walked in the room knowing less than everybody else in the room. And I realized that, leading by telling people what to do is not the right way to lead, because a lot of time people know more than you, but it's really about listening to everyone and getting ideas from people, and then deciding based on all the facts what the best course of action is, and bringing people along with you at the same time versus commanding. And that's and that just like led to a lot of my different moves at Newell, where I came back to the US and I became the internal CEO for Rubbermaid, then Sharpie and Papermate, and then obviously I left eventually. But it was so I think I think everything in my career, which is, you know, a lot of people have had much better career than me. Some people have worse career than me, right? So it's like, well, it's like you're on your own journey. I'm on my own journey. But to me, values are really important.
That's a great story. Now, it does beg a question. What was that conversation like in terms of what was your answers in terms of the values? What are the values that you stand for?
Yeah, I think the key values is it's very much some of the values that, for example, if you come to our to our business here, you know, we finally have the employees back from COVID 3 days a week, and you go to the restroom, the values are on the wall, right? And you go to all the conference room, the values are there, and it's really about being one team. Right. So being one team, at the end of the day, when you are in a business, you know, we all have different ideas. We all have different experiences. We all have different point of view, but we all have one thing in common is we want our business to win. It's not about you winning. It's not about me winning. It's about us winning together as a team. So that's really, really important. The other one too is we should never forget that at the end of the day, we work for the consumers. We want to wow the consumer. So this is something that is really important, I think, in business. Never forget the consumers, right? Sometimes you'll hear all of us in our career with like, oh, this customer or consumer complain about this, and like, oh my God, but when they're gone, you got nothing left, right? So the most important thing in any business is the consumer. So wowing the consumer every day at every touch point is really important. And then, you know, another value that is really important is I mentioned that earlier, is we really want to challenge each other and have an open mindset. So it's about surrounding ourselves with people that don't look like us, that don't think like us, that don't have the same experience as us. They're all very smart people, but they all bring different experience from different, you know, from all kind of different angles. And it's having really the ability to challenge each other. And one of the culture we try to have in our business, Guru, is that doesn't matter if we'll walk in a meeting, we'll have a full room of people, and I say, look, this is what I think. Now let's debate it. And 95% of the time we leave the room with something completely different, right? So I think that value of having an open mindset and challenging each other is really how business can create more value versus just following the idea of a leader. The other one too is we're a global company. It kind of goes back again to more that understanding that, you know, my leadership group in Asia and our employees in Asia, to all the countries that we have, their consumers are different than ours in the US. They have different lifestyle. They do things differently. They all eat, right? Because you know what, an instant brand, we like make sure that our consumer eat really well. But it's about really understanding like what's different. And then the amount of learning and innovation we're able to also drive from understanding that global mindset and harvesting that is really powerful. And then the last one that's part of everything, and this is where obviously, I think that is something that's critical in every business, is integrity. If I tell you I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. I don't need a 25-page contract. If you and I shake hand on something, we know the essence of our agreement. I will kill myself to do what I said I was going to do because we shook hand on it, right? And obviously, you know, it's business, right? So we need to make sure we run as a business, but integrity is really, really important. And I think integrity too, and culture, it's not what happens when everybody's looking. Someone told me one day earlier on in my career, is like culture and integrity is what happens when no one is looking. Right. And I think, you know, and I think that's been said several times too, but I do believe in that.
Yeah, that's great. So Ben, going back to this concept of challenging oneself and having an open mindset, that's a really good one that you bring up. And all of us as leaders want to be able to do that. Are there specific mechanisms outside of, say, leading from the front and just setting the example? Are there mechanisms that you've been able to put in place that introverts, you know, people who don't necessarily speak up, naturally, they actually come out and speak up and open up in meetings or any key ideas and things like that?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, Guru, because as you know, we have extrovert and introvert people, and oftentimes the introvert's voice in this kind of format is not always heard the same as the others. And I think the mechanism, one, is you have to have respect to make sure that we spend the time to listen to everyone. The loudest voice, it's not because you have the loudest voice that means that you're the rightest voice, right? Or you're the right. So I think some of the tools is sometimes to ask the people, like different people, to lead the meeting. So if we want to tackle the strategic subject, is, I don't need to lead it. I can assign it to someone and say, hey, why don't you lead this meeting? And then this person will obviously be in charge. And when you do that, I would always ask the person, come up with a thesis. And then with the thesis, let's debate it and discuss it. And then obviously there's, and I think when teams work together, they kind of know who's who. And I think like the whole concept of let's make sure everybody's voice is heard is really important, because it's also the same thing, right? If you go to different parts of the world, cultures are different. And then you mix everybody together in a meeting room. Some people are so respectful, like unless, like they will not just jump in on the conversation. It's cultural, and because it's showing respect. And it's about making sure that we can really bring all of that together.
Those are great tips, Ben. Thanks for sharing. One of the things which we noticed going through the pandemic, we were always a document writing culture in the company. And going through the pandemic, we actually saw, and we became more of that. And we would write documents if we're discussing some important thing. And it was a very serendipitous learning that we had. We stumbled upon this amazing thing where once you write documents and you read the document about 15, 20 minutes in the beginning of the meeting and be silent, it's amazing. And especially in Google Sheets, you start to see what comments people bring up. And then it starts to then bring out the introverts, extroverts, people from other countries. Everybody sort of has the same voice and they're bringing in the same. And then at the end of 20 minutes, we decide what are we going to talk about, and then we go from there. So that way, everybody gets a level playing field, introvert or extrovert, and that is.
It's a great tool. That's a great tool. I love it.
Yeah. So jumping into your Spin Master days, what a great brand, and it was a lot of our kids grew up with the brands that you all sell. What was it like? Did you apply the same cultural foundations and values foundation as you took on your role as a leader in that organization?
Yeah, I left Newell after 12 years, and before going to Spin Master, the story is a little interesting because it'll kind of shape the journey I had at Spin Master. Is it was time for me to leave Newell. I think I was on my 4th CEO, and we didn't share values, right? We talk about values, and we didn't share values. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It's just what's time for me to go look at my next journey, and I was about ready to take a CEO job for a private equity company, and this is going back almost 10 years now, and I had one of the founders, Spin Master, call me and just says, just come meet me. And I'm like, look, I'm not interested. And then got to look into the company and then realized a lot of those brands were brands that my kids grew up with. And then I'm like, okay, fine, I'll fly to Toronto and we'll have a meeting. And we really hit it off with all the founders. And when I got there, the company was in need of a turnaround. It was not in good shape. This is why they had decided to bring in what they call professional to come help them out. And then from there, it was an amazing, almost 8-year journey.
Got it. And how did that, in your journey, it looks like you actually had a successful turnaround and you went public. How was that journey? And can you talk to us about that turnaround that you went through? Any key learnings out of that?
Yeah. So it's when I went there, actually, it was really funny because when I first started, the financials weren't quite as the same as what I was thought they were, but it's actually funny now. But so what we needed to do was it was a full turnaround, and what we had to do is to really first understand the financials and the cash position, and then like any turnaround, everybody when you do turnaround kind of have their own playbook. And look, I have the one that I've developed over my career in the years, and I've learned from others, and I kind of came up with my own little tricks, different places. But for me, the nuts and bolts is any turnaround, understand the financials and the cash position. Always understand the cash position, because once you can't pay your employees, you got nowhere to go, right? So it's understanding that and making sure that that the business can go forward, and that sometimes required some very, very short-term action, which we had to do that. But then after that, it's really understanding what is working and creates value in the business, and where does the value gets destroyed. And you have to target what gets destroyed with absolute passion and I'm going to say almost violence, right? And because once you actually are able to address that, you realize like the underlying belly of the business typically is not so bad, because every business that exists today, for the most part, they're there because something is working, right? And a company like Spin Master is master of innovation. Like, it's incredible their ability and the system in place to innovate. But then you have to make sure that that all the other system work along the way, and the discipline. So after that, what you do is you have to assess the talent, and for me, assessing the talent is multi-layered. Is always finding out who are the most influential and top 10 key people in the company. Like, if you could only keep 10 people in the company, who would they be? Right. And then typically what you're able to do is build an organization around these people, or then understand the strength and the weaknesses around those people. And then you understand the structure, you make changes as needed. And then you create strategies, right? And those strategies would include the key fixes, right? Addressing what destroys the value, create financial targets, and then making sure the right people, the right talent, the right position. And sometimes that means exiting people. Sometimes that means bringing in new people. A lot of time it means promoting a lot of people. And then it's about execution and measurements. And then, so for us, it took us about 3 years to do all of that, 2 to 3 years. It was really a 2-year turnaround. But then at the same time, we're able to, the innovation pipeline was absolutely phenomenal, right? We launched Zoomer. This is when we launched Paw Patrol, the show. There was all, and then we were like early days of Hatchimals. And then we took the company public at that time, and then we continued growing and grew internationally. So it was actually that time of my life, was very difficult because of the structure and the and how things were set up. But I learned so much from my year Spin Master around how to do innovation, because the toy industry wanted the fastest paced industry. Like, people say, oh yeah, my industry is fast paced as well. I don't think people understand until you work in the toy industry. One of the hardest industry ever. And the learnings I got from this were just phenomenal.
That's a great story. And I love your almost like a 5-step process, understanding the cash position and take short-term actions. Number 2, what's working, double down on that and remove the ones that are not working, or value destructions, as you call it. Number 3, assessing and doubling down on the right talent. Then go to strategy, and then go to innovation. I love that 5-step process almost.
Yeah.
Now we are living in a very virtual world, and you've always led companies, I'm assuming, in person and all that. How has the last 1 year changed your leadership styles or your values, if any?
Well, I'm very, very proficient with Zoom.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's really, really interesting because none of us have ever had to do that, right? So I actually started at Instant Brand in June 2020. So nobody was in the office. Nobody was on the road. So even today, a year later, I haven't met my executive team in Asia. I haven't met my executive team in Europe. I haven't met the founder of the Instant Pot, who's in Ottawa, Canada, right? Because that's being locked down pretty hard as well. And most of the people wouldn't come in the office. So some of us would come in the office every day, right? We had a core of 4 or 5 people. We came into work every day because we're like, look, we can't do what we need to do if we don't at least like spend time together. So, and then we would literally run Zoom meeting from 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. every day. And we got it done. And I have to say, people adjusted pretty well. It's not easy because, look, at the end of the day, it's like you and I, right? It'd be great right now if we could go have dinner. And then, because I do think the in-person is really important, because I think human connection is still really, really important. But we learned that there's other ways to do things as well. Not necessarily ideal, but it works. And so I think we all had to learn. All had to learn on the fly, on the spot. But when you're doing a business transformation on Zoom, this is something that we all had to learn, right? Kind of So, but it was good. I mean, I think I think the people are really resilient. Like in our business, the people are great. They're all very flexible, and they all want to be part of that one team, right? So we spend a lot of time on the values. Like, what values do we want in Instant Brand? And when I came in, there was like so many great people in this business. So, and then it's all about, okay, so we're here now, but now where we're going to go, and then having all these discussions, right? Like we talked about earlier. And instead of doing the conference room, we did it on Zoom. So we got it done.
That's fascinating. By the way, one pro tip which has helped me personally on Zoom is to hide your self view. It oftentimes is tiring to look at yourself.
Yeah.
Fascinating discussion on that, Ben. So that brings me to the next part of it, which is, I know you're an avid documentary fan. Are there any documentaries that you would recommend leaders to watch?
You know, there's so much, like whenever I can find an hour, you know, some people read book. I'll read book from time to time, but I just love Netflix and Prime and look at all the documentary. Like the one I'm watching right now has been out for a little bit. It's called Rotten, right? Which is all around food and the food supply chain around the world. Fascinating. Another one is like these little 18-minute tidbits on Explain. Right? You want to learn about coding, it tells you about that. You want to learn about astrology, I'll tell you about that. So I think what I really like is not necessarily just doing, a lot of it too is about World War II, about world history, different cultural aspect, right? Like shows like Anthony Bourdain, I always thought was fantastic, you know, mini documentary around food. And obviously we're in the food business, so I have a little bit of an affinity to it. But I think what is always so, important for me is to keep rounding myself up. Like, you know, like I don't necessarily read that much business book anymore. A lot of people, like when I was younger, I would read a lot of business book, right? Like all the Jack Welch business book. And, you know, I mean, I would read them all. And now I'm just at, like, I don't enjoy it as much as I just like to like do other things, right? I'm very visual. So I like documentary. So because it just, you know, it gives you a different dimension. If I read books, I actually like to read a biography from rock stars. I always think it's really interesting because a lot of those guys start from nothing and then they have everything, then they lose everything. You know, but it's still fascinating. And I also like really inspirational stuff. Like, you know, one thing that I've really enjoyed lately is the Hero Code or Make Your Bed by Admiral William McRaven. I don't know if you know him, if you heard about him, but it's like tiny little stories, tiny little chapters about integrity, about like discipline, about courage. And I just think like those are incredible reminder for everyone to read. And it's not people don't understand it. They're great reminders. And so you know, so this is what I kind of like doing on a little bit of my free time.
That's awesome. I've got my next 5 weekends cut out now. That's great. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
And Ben, you also seem to spend a lot of time on charitable initiatives. I'm very curious on what particularly piques your interest in support, what sort of causes, and also what are specific things that you've taken away personally and professionally from these experiences?
I think, I mean, first I'll start, Guru, that, you know, going back to what you were talking earlier is, you know, you and me and a lot of people that will end up listening to this we're all very fortunate, right? I mean, I think we should every day we get out of bed, we should say, thank you, I am lucky, right? And thank you, I've been given the right opportunities in life to be able to have a roof over my head and being, you know, for the most part, healthy and just be able to go on and have a good job. And, you know, so I think we have so much all to be really thankful. And then you look around you and it's not necessarily the case for everyone. And you go around the world and, you know, we all see things that are happening. So for me, what is important and my family as well is we want to find ways we can give back a little bit. So some of the things that I've been really passionate about is taking my families in different part of the world, build a hospital, build schools in like Kenya and India and Ecuador, in some of these places, and really being enriched where we would spend 2/3 of the trip, you know, with the local communities, and it's great for my kids because they get a completely different exposure to, like, you know, we're talking about our kids are so entitled. I think it also enrich our kid very early on, and it gives them a bit of an appreciation. So I think doing these trips as a family is something I would recommend for everyone to go do. But we also work with some inner cities program, and again, a lot of it we do as a family, right? Because I think it's a great way for the family to bond to and be appreciative and try to help others. And then we, like another organization I'm really fond of is called Cal's Angels, which is pediatric cancer, and we've actually partnered up with them at Instant Brand. But it's an organization that focuses on helping families with kids that have cancer. Because, a lot of time what people don't know, and that's a little bit of an advertisement here, but what a lot of people don't know is when kids have cancer, they have to oftentimes pick up and leave and go to different cities because the cities they live in don't necessarily have the hospital, the facilities to treat the kid. And then the kids might be away going in and out of the hospital for months. So the parents have to normally rent rooms, rent apartment, and it puts an incredible financial hardship on the family. So this organization helped relieve some of the hardship for these families so that they don't lose their mortgage, they don't lose their cars, they don't lose everything while they're getting treatment for the kids. And also fund research for kids pediatric, because one thing that people don't know too is, I forget the exact number, but it's a tiny little fraction of all the research dollar that goes toward kids, because the financials on kids is not good. It doesn't give you a good ROI in the medical world, right? Because adult lives your adult life forever. Kids live their lives only for a little bit. So there's very, very little money in research. So anyway, so Cal's Angel is one of the organizations, and anybody listening to that, go check out calsangels.com, and any ways you can help is just wonderful. And you can spend time doing visit in the hospital, helping the kids, bringing them pizza, or do fundraising, or sometimes it's giving them car rides and nice cars, and they have all kind of program, and it's a really, really good organization. So that's one of them.
That's fantastic. And we will leave links for these charitable organizations that Ben talked about in the comment section for viewers to come in and engage with these organizations as well. But Ben, it was fantastic having you. Really appreciate you sharing your stories. Lots of learnings that we can take away. And it was just great to have you on the show. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much, Guru. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you.
If you enjoyed listening to this episode, it would mean so much to us if you could take a moment to share this show on LinkedIn. To learn more how Guru and his team can help optimize and grow your e-commerce business on Amazon and other retailers, visit commerceiq.ai. Thanks for listening.